Humans uniquely exist with a mixture of both communal and individualistic tendencies, known in the scientific world as tournament versus pair bonding species. All of the evidence suggests that this tendency has greatly improved our success as a species, but those tendencies, distorted too far one way or another, lead to pathologies and the worst collective misdeeds and wars. Complex adaptive systems begin to break down if the signals coming from the randomness is suppressed or repressed. It interferes with the functioning of the whole system. Order completely begins to break down because of the butterfly effect. I think the majority of the people on the right genuinely do want to help society by bringing order, using a top-down and draconian measures if necessary, whereas the left generally wants to help society by proactively building up. But I think both of these approaches are necessary for a healthy, functioning society to exist. It seems our tendency to harness both traits and to focus intently on one or the other is both our greatest strength and also our greatest weakness. And similarly, on an individual level, I believe our greatest strength and our greatest weakness is the fact that our brains work efficiently by categorizing information and filtering out the unimportant bits that slow us down. But finding that balance between cooperation versus competition on an individual and a collective level seems to be one of the most rewarding and challenging endeavors. Being able to walk the path, as the Buddhists might say, between living for yourself and living for others. As the book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, brilliantly explains, the slow, deliberate, considered thinking takes energy and time, so our brains develop filters which come out as biases. This is an inherent weakness of our brain. Consider the butterfly effect for just one person who has been influenced by the brainworms of QAnon cults and conspiracies, which distort their internal models of the world that they use to filter information. The sad and shocking stories on forums like QAnon Casualties show the devastating effects on people with their close families and friends, amplified by their ever-increasing disconnected lives. Now scale that up to the level of a whole country, or a nation, or the world. This is a collective madness to cope and avoid the reality facing us as a species. Yet only collective action, with agreed upon basic facts to work from, will do to avoid total destruction and descent into chaos. I've put forward the case for the 4 key arguments being true, and I've presented supporting evidence and logical reasoning for why I think our current definitions need updating and their threat levels reassessed from a non-hysterical but critical perspective. The overall claims I've made are: number 1, modern fascism has taken over right-wing populism and bears all the hallmarks of 20th century fascism. Number 2, the ideology has 2 core reasons to exist, and 2 distinct audience types, which both have a symbiotic pathological relationship with each other. Number 3, the main flaws and weaknesses of fascist ideology remain the same as ever, that fascism is motivated by irrational fears, greed and self-deception. Number 4, modern fascism has major unforeseen damaging consequences for individuals, governments and organisational dynamics, and society at large. This reality is something that I think that a lot of people who have been influenced by this propaganda know deep down on some level, that they're avoiding the realities of pandemics, ecological harms and ignoring science and reality as it really is. They ignore it because fantasies are much simpler to understand, and a narrative based on fear of others is much simpler to process in a complex world. It's also attractive to the part of us that is drawn to conflict and drama, that part of us that hungers for something genuinely interesting to happen. But I would argue from my experience that the beautiful complexity of life in all its shades of grey is much more interesting, fun and genuinely fulfilling to understand and engage in, even if it might be harder to deal with and even harder to explain. I believe doing so is vital for the very survival of our species. We can no longer afford to live in a fantasy. We need to collectively take responsibility for the world as it exists in reality. Thank you for watching my video, and thank you to the support from my Patreons. Please consider helping me make more content like this, either directly as a one-off payment or regularly through Patreon, which helps me to survive and eat.